Brian Irvine has the task of winning the cup for Aberdeen. Aberdeen have won. It's Brian Irvine who wins the cup in the end for Aberdeen.
Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of All Been Done. Today I chat with Brian Irvine, who was a huge part of the Aberdeen team when I was growing up, so it was a real pleasure to chat to him. Please like, share and subscribe to the podcast to get notifications as soon as they're uploaded. And now, without any further ado, here's my chat with Brian Irvine. Welcome to episode 2 of All Been Done. I'm delighted to welcome my guest for this episode, Brian Irvine. Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. It's really good to see you.
Thank you, Paul. Delighted to be with you.
So let's talk about your early footballing life. Like, just growing up, did you get a chance to watch a lot of football? Who did you like watching? Did you have any heroes?
Yeah, as I grew up, this is such a long time now. So we're speaking like if you think you should growing up, normally that would be roughly 5 to. That's when your kind of memory comes back about your first things you did. So from 5-year-old onwards, which is 50 years ago now, because I'm 55 now. So my memories of Aberdeen. My mum and dad are from Aberdeen, so I moved out in the Glasgow area. So I was brought up in the Glasgow area because my dad relocated with work. So I had to be brought up in just outside Glasgow in Airdrie. So my memories of childhood are playing football in the local school with my friends. I always used to commentate when I was playing with my pals and myself. And, you know, when I became a bit older, maybe 10 or whatever long, you would start commentating about Aberdeen games because Aberdeen were my team, even though I was based in Glasgow.
How was that growing up? Like everyone else around you supporting Rangers and Celtic, I'd assume.
Yeah, it's difficult because obviously the odd one out, but not just that. My dad was a policeman, so you were a policeman's son, and we were brought up in. My dad and mum stayed in police houses and basically council estates in the Airdrie area. So it's kind of tough areas. So you could have got a lot of stick, I think, or a lot of things could have went against you. But I think because of your football, I was quite good at the football. That kind of gave you a bit of credence and amongst other guys. So they didn't really take advantage or take the mickey out of you in the way that perhaps if you were that way, you could have. Because maybe you were a good footballer. Obviously, as I was growing up, I was growing quite tall. So I've always been tall. I'm 6'2" now, 6'2.5", I think it is. So I had that on my favour in terms of not getting stick or picked on or even worse, bullied or whatever. So nothing like that happened. And I think it was down to the fact that I liked football. I really liked football, and people thought, "Oh yeah, he's quite good at football." So that was what kept me out of trouble, if you like, in these troubled areas that we lived in. And what I think back to these council estates where we lived, there's actually some positive memories of the people in the area. So it's not negative at all in my mind. It's pretty positive about the people.
When you started playing football, was it just schools football? Where did you like to play when you were playing for schools and stuff?
Yeah, it was schools, local street. I'm saying about the neighbours, for example. We used to have a wee team in the street with a wee street league and things like that. So you played in the street team, and then when you did well at school, you had the school team, selects and things like that. But then the football connection that I had around 15, I think it was, I stopped playing football altogether. And I think the reason for that, Paul, was just obviously now I wear glasses. I've always had poor vision, but that wasn't highlighted till I left school. And I went for an eye test and things like that. It's not as common now to go for eye tests now as it was back when we were speaking 50 years ago here. So yeah, it's not picked up. And so I think that's why I stopped playing football, because basically I wasn't seen clearly. And so in my 4th year at school, playing with the school team and my local boys club team and the amateur team, even that connection with them I stopped because I couldn't see the ball properly. And then once I got contact lenses and glasses, I couldn't wear the glasses in the park, but for contact lenses I got, and I remember the first contact lens I got, they were big these ones, they were like glass. Nowadays they're so pliable and in and out. You don't even know you're wearing them, but you kind of knew you were wearing contact lenses and back in those days. But anyway, they made me able to see again, which was wonderful. And so that's where I get back into football. So around my fifth year at school, I started playing again, and that's where it all kind of took off, because I liked playing with the school team. A team called Victoria Park in Airdrie was the under-18 team I played for. But while I was playing with those, I was quickly picked up by and asked to go for a trial with Falkirk. Played a trial game with Falkirk and signed for Falkirk. So I'd left school by now, by the time all this happened. So the normal way for somebody who's really into football is to leave school and go straight into football. I didn't do that. I kind of come in the back doorway. So I ended up working in a bank for 3 years. During that time, I was playing for Falkirk. But then when I was playing for Falkirk, that's where it all took off, and the excitement really started, because Aberdeen, who were the team in the day, almost like your Celtic of recent years, and Rangers in recent times as well, who dominated. Aberdeen were a dominant team in football. And as I say, I supported Aberdeen, even though I came from the Glasgow area. And so, again, it's unbelievable to think Aberdeen want to sign me. If I could have picked a whole team in the world, that would have been Aberdeen. That's how dying the role I am as a supporter of Aberdeen. And so to get a chance, although I'm semi-professional with Falkirk, kind of fulfilling an ambition to be a footballer, that paled into insignificance when I think, here's Aberdeen, Alec Ferguson and the Aberdeen team, the current team who were league champions, had just won the European Cup, Winners' Cup. They want to sign me. It's unbelievable. I couldn't believe it, Paul. Couldn't believe it.
What do you remember your first day going up, signing?
Yeah. It was over the summer. So I resigned from position in the bank, finished my time in the bank. Then my cousin, who was down visiting my mum and dad from Inverurie, he took me back home. He was going home, so he took me up the road with him, dropped me at Airdrie. And actually, I can remember the day quite clearly, because nobody was around, because the training was finished. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon by the time we got up in Aberdeen. My cousin dropped me off, drove off to Inverurie, and Alec Ferguson took me around to my digs in Aberdeen. And I just think to myself now, 50 odd, well, not 50, obviously it's 30 years later, or around that, 35 years later, I'm thinking, I didn't know how my life was going to change as a result of what was going to happen from today onwards, with the people you've met. And now that it's all complete, if you like, and there's no real involvement with football for me now, it's like a bubble of 35 years. And it's great to continue that bubble as best I can. But it gives me great hope for now, for example, where I'm not really involved in football, that maybe there's a situation like this lying ahead. It'll open doors. I mean, it's quite difficult just now because of lockdown and all the trouble we've had with the coronavirus, that everybody's kind of locked down and you're doing nothing, feeling, there's always opportunities there, and the opportunity that stood in front of me at Aberdeen was unbelievable. I couldn't believe what was going to lie ahead. Standing, as you say, my first day, where I'm not even training, I'm just standing outside Airdrie waiting to get a lift from Alec Ferguson to my digs. I had no idea what was lying ahead of me in football and in life in general as a result of what was going to be me signing for Aberdeen.
Were you training with the first team immediately after signing, or was it?
Yeah, that's a good. Even though I wasn't really signed as a first team player, it was going to be long term. Alec Ferguson signed me with that in mind. Alec McLeish was centre half. Wally Miller was the centre half. There's no way, even nowadays, for example, you'd say I was going to take over from Alec and Wally.
That's something that you thought about when you said, you obviously were so excited to sign as a fan and stuff like that, and the champions, and Alex Ferguson's asking you to come and play for them. But did you think, I'm not going to get a lot of game time here?
Initially, definitely, Paul. Initially, that was the case, because you thought, well, I'm not going to be able to lace their boots, never mind take their place, So, but all you can do, what is it, the old saying about the best way to start a 100-mile walk is take the first step, and that's basically what it came down to, So first step was to just basically, first day of training, the next day, train pre-season, the hard pre-season training, then again with the reserves, getting into the reserves, establish myself in the reserves. Because it was pre-season, Alec Ferguson gave me some games in pre-season friendlies, which was good experience. But then the majority of my first season was just playing in the reserves and learning in the reserves. And I learned a lot of things in the reserves, you know, because I was still just relatively young. I was just about 20. So, I had a lot to learn in terms of football, the kind of the ups and downs. You know, that you think, oh, they're a good win there today, and the next game that'll be easy, but it's not. The next game's a nightmare. You have a poor game, and suddenly you're thinking, oh, this is not so easy. So, yeah, just all the experiences you have to go through to learn how to be a footballer.
Yeah.
And then when the opportunities came to get a first team game in the league, I think it was at the end of the first season at Clydebank, just before the Scottish Cup final against Hearts, where Alec and Willie were getting rested. So I managed to get a game. And so that was the first step, getting a first team game at the end of the season. Then the next season, after the season started, Wally had been injured in Mexico in the World Cup in '86. So that opened the door a bit to get a run of games with 6 or 7 games at the start of the season. But pretty small amount of games in the first team. So it's just small steps, Paul. Small steps, little by little.
Debut, you were saying it against Clydebank there. Had you been on the bench for a little while leading up to that, or was it just a case of getting the call and saying, right, Brian, we need you for the first team today, sort of thing?
Just first team debut was no. I think as a centre half, it's difficult, especially back in those days, was only 2 subs to get a shot on the bench. Nowadays, you've got a cast of thousands on the bench, so you would maybe be on the bench for 2-3 months leading up to your debut. But in those days, you're either in the 11 or in the 13, as it was. 2 outfield players plus 11 that was all you had. So really, you went from, I'm playing regular in the reserves at Aberdeen, and with a good season. In that first season in the reserves, we won the Premier Reserve League, and a lot of people used to say, obviously Aberdeen were still strong in the first team, but a lot of people used to say, that Aberdeen reserve team could hold its own in the Premier League. With quite a good depth.
Yeah, there was
squad.
Reserve team football was very different back then, wasn't it? Because it was a lot of second string and players coming back from injury, so you were effectively playing first team players a lot of the time, weren't you?
Yeah, no, and the way it was in those days, it's different from now, but the reserves mirrored the first team. So the first team, for example, Aberdeen would be playing Hibs at Airdrie. So the reserves would play Hibs at Easter Road, but they both play on the same day at the same time. So you either were in the first team or you were in the reserves. It was 2 separate teams for Aberdeen. It was 2 separate teams for all Premier teams. So it's quite an organised setup in league. And as I say, it was a good season for the reserves. We won the league. The Premier League.
You said earlier on about the 100-mile journey starts with 1 step. So was making your first team debut just feel like another step, or was it like, do you get nervous? Did you feel that?
Oh, I probably was nervous. I don't remember now how nervous I was, obviously. But yeah, that was another step. Maybe, I don't know, 4, 5, 6, 7 along the way. And so make another step, and that was it. Just put another. I'd played at Clydebank, who don't even exist nowadays. I'd played at Clydebank before for Falkirk a number of times, so it wasn't as if it was a new venue and you're kind of a little bit wary of the stadium. Kilbowie Park wasn't the most intimidating. It was quite a nice little stadium. It was kind of all seated, as I remember it in my mind. It's probably not even a stadium now. It's probably demolished for housing or something. But yeah, it was another step, and it was a big step, because the other step after that was Alec Ferguson showed great management by keeping me involved in the squad for the cup final. So I was never going to play in the cup final. Alec and Wally were always going to come back to their places for the cup. They were just being rested for the final. But Alec Ferguson kept me involved in the squad. And in the day when there's not a whole host of subs, there was 2 subs, and the physio, Teddy Scott, and myself sitting on the bench at Hampden. So that was such a boost for Alec Ferguson to do that, to involve you in the squad, even though you're not going to go on the park, you're not going to play in the final, just to give you that involvement of playing and being involved in a cup final squad. That was all credit to him again for how he just made that something, that experience that would make it easier when it did come to being for real for yourself. whether it be the next season or whenever Aberdeen would get into a final again. But, credit to Alex Ferguson for doing that.
The following season, obviously, Alex Ferguson leaves. I'm 38 years old, so I don't really remember Alex Ferguson being manager of Aberdeen. But you can see, looking back now, the change and then what he went on to do. But what was it like? Was his loss felt as much at that time to the players and around the club when he left? Or was it just the manager's gone, here's the new manager, we go on with the next?
Well, Ian Porterfield took over from Alex Ferguson, and I liked Ian Porterfield. I thought he was a good manager. He had his critics, he had things that people didn't like about him, but I thought, for me personally, he was good, and so I just got on with playing for Ian Porterfield. But all the time, the influence of Alex Ferguson was always there for myself and for the team in general, and I think that's the way Alex Ferguson works. He kept in touch with you. So even though he moved to Manchester United, and we were all kind of pleased for him, but also thinking, what's going to happen now? How are we going to get a better manager now? He kept in touch, and he used to drop you a text or you'd write to him at the training ground at Manchester, and he would get back to you and things like that. So he would always show interest in any experience or any situation you were having, any difficulty you'd had, and give you a bit of advice. And that's the influence he has, and that's what makes it different for MD who followed. And I think Ian Porterfield, who followed, was a good manager. Certainly, as I said there, it was good for me. But I think it's always happened with Alex Ferguson. Anybody who's replaced him at Manchester United as well has found it very difficult as well, because of the influence he's got, not just when he's there, but what the influence he's had in the players beyond when he leaves or when he's retired. So, he was such a great man and such a great influence in people that although people have to then play for a new manager, whether it's Aberdeen or Manchester United, that you can never let go of that Alex Ferguson influence. Does that make sense?
Yeah, obviously, the core of that team, like Miller, McLeish, Leighton, Simpson, Cooper, etc., and did so long working under Ferguson. Did Porterfield have his own ideas? Was it a big change, or was it just a case of, this is working, we'll try and carry on with this and kind of ease in my ideas?
Yeah, I think Ian Porterfield was unlucky. There's a fine line in football, and I think a lot of his fine lines, unfortunately, the thing fell the wrong way of a loss rather than a win. I mean, I think of the 3 times we played in the semi-final of the Scottish Cup, I didn't play in the games again. I wasn't. Zalek and Willett were the centre halves, but I was down in the games, in the squad rather. And at Dundee United, we lost after 3 games in the semi-final to Dundee United in '88, I think it was. The League Cup final for 3 years in a row, we had went head-to-head with Rangers. One of them being a penalty shootout where we lost. A game it could have went either way. So, and in the league, he had a good record in the league, and a lot of draws that cost us in the position when it was 2 points for a win and 1 for a draw. So yeah, that fine line, Ian Porterfield unfortunately fell at the wrong side of a success in terms of a cup or a league win again, because he was I think without a doubt he was a good manager, and I thought he had some good ideas. He brought in Jimmy Mullen as his assistant, and Jimmy and him both didn't really know the Scottish game at that time, so there was a wee bit of unknown for them that maybe they could have done with a local, as in a Scottish person who might have given them a bit more insight.
Yeah, I mean, you played a good number of games on the court, as you said. Willie Miller was injured, but even in he had 1 full season, you still played, according to the internet, you still played about just over 20 games that season as well. And he signed Charlie Nicholas as well, obviously. Yeah. That was a huge signing at the time, big money, coming up from Arsenal. Obviously, he was only there for a year or 2 before the Celtic came a-calling again. But what are your memories of that era, like personally, like playing, your performances, your development as a player?
Yeah, well, it was part of the steps we've taken, more and more steps you see along the journey, and some bits are breaking into a jog, we're getting a good run of games in the team. Ian was quite good. He used to play me in different positions, man marking in midfield, for example. He'd give me that role. And so, I think he helped, and a lot of the advice he gave me was good advice. So a lot of his experience and management's, I've got a lot to thank for, because I think he was very good for me personally, as I've kind of made it clear. And the signing of Charlie, for example, was a big one. Charlie Nicholas was the big name player at the time, and you couldn't believe it. We just signed Charlie Nicholas, and he was a quality player. And I think he did a really good job at Aberdeen, Charlie, because before he went back to Celtic, he helped the 1980 Scottish Cup final when he played in the game against Celtic when we won it, obviously. So he had a great 2 years at Aberdeen. His fitness was a bit dodgy when he arrived, but Jockey Scott and Alex Smith were the managers. They got his fitness up and got him when they took over from me in Porterfield, I should say, and that made a difference to Charlie's play. And Charlie was somebody, in my memory at the time, I thought was a real quality player, and it was just all credit to Ian Porterfield for signing a player like that, because I don't know what the equivalent today would be, but signing a big name like Charlie Nicholas, who was a big name in Scottish football while he was down in Arsenal, it's difficult for current fans to imagine when we're speaking something about 30 years ago, but yeah. Charlie was the big name, and he became a great player for Aberdeen and did really well in the 2 seasons. I mean, remember when we won the Scottish Cup in 1990, we won the League Cup the same year and finished second in the league. So that's as near a treble as you could get. Yeah. So that shows how strong the Aberdeen team was.
First, we win the League Cup finally after those 2 defeats to Rangers. We get that win, Paul Mason scoring 2, and you came off the bench that day. Yeah. How long were you on the pitch for? Do you remember?
It was long enough, because that was the main thing for me. I'd played in a cup final. I couldn't believe it. I've played my first appearance. So that's the progression from the Alec Ferguson let me sit on the bench to watch a game against Hearts in 1986. Here we are in 1989, coming off the bench, I think, for the last 5-10 minutes in the extra time to replace Ian Jess. Just somebody tired, and just from the team point of view, it was just an effective thing to do. But for me personally, it's unbelievable. I'm on the pitch. I'm keep my head, do your bit, and try and win this cup. And thankfully, we won the cup. And so, wow, and now I can always remember, even though I'd only been on part for a few minutes, now all this love and support for Aberdeen that I've got has been transmitted into not only winning a reserve medal with the league when I first came, but winning an actual trophy of the League Cup. So that was an amazing step in my journey, if you like, of doing things for Aberdeen. Obviously, it was going to be eclipsed by the Scottish Cup later in the season, but that was an amazing feeling when I reflected in that night. We've won this cup, great win against Rangers after three seasons against them, 2 being so close to winning, but now we've won it, and the fact that you've done something that contributes to Aberdeen's history of cup winning things, whether it be League Cup or whatever, so that was a great feeling, I must admit, personally, that night.
Obviously, the run to the Scottish Cup final. You scored in the semi-final as well, of course.
A good run in the quarter-final as well against Hearts. And so the Scottish Cup that season just had my name on it, if you like, in terms of contribution. And so a lot of good memories of the Scottish Cup run. 6-2 win against Partick Thistle, then a 2-1 win against Morton at home, 4-1 against Hearts, where I scored, as you say, then an amazing 4-0 win against Dundee United at Tynecastle, where I was given 2 goals, but one of them came off mixed with Pat Linen's head last, so it was more an own goal. But I certainly got one of the goals, so I got a goal in the semi, and I certainly then went on to score 1 goal in the final, which is maybe not a goal as in credited to your record, but certainly an important goal when it came to demonstrate.
It's the one everyone remembers, isn't it? It's not a bad thing to have as your legacy, is it?
It's an amazing privilege. I mean, it was just one of these things that it worked out for me, that I wasn't a confident penalty taker, so I wasn't going to hit a penalty early if it was because I wasn't going to let the team down, for example. Not because I was frightened of missing or scared of missing, just I didn't want the team to get let down. And so I didn't take one in the first 5. When it came to sudden death, I still wasn't volunteering. But when it came to the point where there was nobody left, there's no option. But thankfully for me, the guys that were under pressure were the ones in the sudden death, because Celtic always scored, so we missed, Celtic had won it. When it came to my one, Anton Rogan missed, great save by Theo, Snelders, I must admit, without a doubt. That's kind of a major thing. It's always speak about Anton Rogan missing. I think it's a great save with Theo Snelders. But anyway, when it comes to me, I'm in the position to hit the winning penalty. It's like a win-win situation. And wow, you know,
Feel that took the pressure off you a little bit. So when you're walking, doing the walk, you're thinking, well, if I miss, we've not lost.
Yeah,
is that going through your mind?
That's what I'm saying, Paul. Yeah, it's a win-win situation because, okay, I'm not confident hitting a penalty, but if the worst happens and I miss, it's all level, and it'll be on to somebody else. So it was a win-win situation for me, and I just can't believe how it's good fortune that I managed to get in the position to score the winner. And I'd made my mind up where I was going to put the ball as I walked up to hit the penalty. Obviously, the Celtic fans are making a lot of noise to try and put you off, but it was behind into the Aberdeen end, so I was into the Aberdeen supporters, so it was a good position. And when you hit them, and I knew where I was going to hit the penalty, and Bonner went down early and went the wrong way, so I knew if I make the right contact, it should be okay. And then I immediately look up and see the Aberdeen fans going celebrating like mad. So yeah, it's like 30 years ago, as we all know, but it feels like yesterday when you start speaking about it.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I was only young. I do remember us winning the 2 cups that year, but watching it at home on the telly with my old man. You know, it's mad to think, isn't it, that it's been 30 years now since the Scottish Cup.
Yeah. There's no. I mean, I think a provisional club, there is a chance. We'll get a chance, and so it probably will happen again. Will happen again, I'm sure. But it's not regular like Celtic and Rangers who dominate Scottish football or whatever. But the Scottish Cup or the League Cup gives you an opportunity on a one-off day to win something, as opposed to the league where Celtic and Rangers have just done. I mean, what Celtic have done, for example, in the last 4 years, I don't think we fully understand. They've won everything.
It's insane.
For 4 years. It's just crazy. So that's how dominant, because of the money and the position they've got in the game, that the Old Firm can. But provincial clubs like Aberdeen get a chance, and so we'll just have to take every opportunity when it comes. We've come close with semi-finals, finals even, and runners-up over the years. And, 1 year it will go in our favour and we'll win it, just like we obviously did in 1990. But meanwhile, I'm happy to speak about it.
I'm sure no matter the next time we win it, people will still want to talk about 1990. Don't you worry about that. Quad at that time as well, just to touch back on that season. Hans Halehouse was arriving. Ian Jess was coming through. There were some other youngsters just on the periphery as well, looking to come in, like Stephen Knight, Scott Booth, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
The youth system was really churning out some proper players, like late 80s into the early 90s. What was that like to be around that young spark getting added to the more experienced players?
Yeah, the youth and the reserve and the whole backroom staff at Aberdeen were doing a great job. But I think a lot of it does. There's a bit of good fortune, but you still have to get these players in position, like Alec Ferguson did with the youngsters in the 80s, to build such a dominant team, along with the experienced players that he had in the 80s. It's the same with the youth squad at Aberdeen in the 90s. There was like Scott Booth, you say, Stephen Wright, Ian Jess, whether they're local boys coming through the ranks or whether it's players that have been spotted at 17 or whatever from somewhere else and brought into Aberdeen's setup. They have to get that. It's making a cake, really. Just you have to get those ingredients right at the time, either the homegrown guys or the guys that are brought in. So yeah, it's that's just what you've got. You've just got to hope that you can get that break. And Aberdeen have done that, and maybe over recent years when we've had success with Aberdeen, part of the problem could be we just haven't had the right youth coming through, but the academy's there now, and so there's young people coming through now, but you don't get the result tomorrow. The result comes in years to come, and you forget, that was the academy or the youth setup that brought that success, because it's 10 years later. And so who knows what's going to happen, with the...
Yeah, also you've got facility now as well at Cormac Park. Something I'm sure you'd have loved to have had in your days. You'd have to run up those dunes at Balgownie or whatever it is, or run around Seaton Park. I'm assuming was a big part of training back for you. You were playing a lot more around this era. I think it was the sort of the time that injuries were really starting to hit their toll on Willie Miller as well. So
Yeah.
he was starting to fade out of the first team and head towards retirement. So you were playing a lot more with Alec McLeish.
Yeah.
How do you feel that you and McLeish worked together? Did he talk you through games? Was he vocal? Were you the more vocal one?
Oh no, Big Alec was the vocal one, and Alec was a great player, a great man. I really respect Alec, and he did well for Aberdeen, obviously, and did well in his football career. In terms of after Aberdeen, he's done amazing things there in management. So Alec was a great people person, along the lines of Alec Ferguson is a great man manager. For example, Willie Miller was meticulous and detailed in what he did, but Willie just lacked that wee bit of personnel strength to get the best out of people. Getting alongside them, he would be able to show you how to do it in a diagram or explain it in great detail. And Willie was very good at that. But Willie wasn't a people person. Does that make sense? And so
he would know exactly what to do, but he would tell every person the same way. Whereas
Alec was more
one person might
personal.
want an arm around the shoulder, where another person might need a kick up the bum. And
that's the type of man that Alec Ferguson was. Just that arm around the shoulder or the kick up the bum, as you say, perfectly describes it. You knew what everybody needed. It was different. Everybody is different. So, that's just how you've got to be a manager. It's something that you've either got or you don't. And I think it makes you a great manager or just another average manager or worse, a poor manager.
Following season where the league's super tight and then we go to Ibrox and things just go against us. Do you have a lot of memories of that sort of time? Obviously, we were so close to winning the league.
Played most of that season, Paul, and then picked up a groin injury during the season. So I was taking injections to try and vault all a bit stronger and to try and get through the games. And so I missed the actual Ibrox game. I was sitting on the bench, but never going to go on because I think it was 4 games to go. I came out and then I got booked in for an operation down in in London to get my Gilmer's groin. It was fixed. So that season, that's how it ended for me with injury. But worse than the injury was just the fact we'd come so close to actually winning the Premier League, and it was a tough ask to beat Rangers at Ibrox we could have quite easily got a draw, and just unfortunately we never got a draw. We didn't go for a draw, we went for I remember clearly the manager saying, let's get a result here today in terms of a win. But a lot of people thought a draw was going to be enough because we were top of the league in it. That last game, and a draw would have been enough. But, it was to get a draw or a win. With hindsight now, looking back at that time, it was going to be a difficult ask at Ibrox. And, Rangers got the break when Haitley scored 2 goals and scored a great first goal especially, and that was it. So that was devastating from a football point of view that we had lost out on the chance to win the league after coming so close. And, we thought we had it in our grasp, but just not so close but so far.
Yeah, and then you kind of get the feeling that, well, you rebuild, you re-go, and you just go again, let's go again, and do the same. But then obviously Jockey Scott left to go to Dunfermline.
Yeah.
And then Alex Smith was sacked as well. What changed around from that pre-season to, obviously Jockey left in September, and then it went to February till Alex Smith was gone. But was there a change, anything specific that changed that caused the going from being at Ibrox to needing that draw to the manager getting sacked a few months later?
Not for me personally, I could see, but things were going on behind the scenes probably that you just don't know, and I'm sure there was things happening. I think Jockey leaving was a big one, and Alex Smith brought in Wally onto the coaching team to try and help him develop, and his plan was eventually Wally would become the manager, but maybe not quite as quick to replace him, as you say, when he was sacked. So yeah, just things that were maybe going on I had no idea and still don't, because I just didn't have the, I'm not like a supporter who speculates, and that's part of the joy of being a supporter. You can say, gossip or rumour monger. I don't know the facts, so I don't really know. But I know there was obviously stuff going on behind the scenes that led to Alex Smith leaving, which was, I think, a bad thing. With hindsight now, you look back and think, no, Alex Smith would have been better, because we're still mid-table, doing okay in the league. It's just, the expectations of trying to win. We weren't going to win the league that season. Weren't going to happen this season. But, Alec had a good record. And, I think with hindsight again, if they hadn't bowed to the fans' pressure, because there was some fans were making noises that they wanted Smith to go, for example, and so the board just decided to do that and bring in Woolley. But that didn't work out because Woolley was a good manager as well, but as I say, he just lacked that personal touch that I think a great manager has, that man management skill that either has or hasn't got.
2 full seasons under Willie Miller. He played a lot of games. 92, 93. Obviously, we got the unwanted treble of 2 cup finals and the second in the league. But again, it's kind of similar to now. You come up against this juggernaut of a Rangers team that are just like, what are you supposed to do against that?
Yeah.
And then the following season, you're still playing. You play over 50 games, and again, we only concede. Just looking here, 36 games in the 44 league games that season. So obviously, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but obviously you've played a lot of games. Alec must have played a lot of games, and then it must have been Theo was keeping things tight at the back.
Yeah.
And so was there a consistency there by this time? Maybe that you've got a back four that are all playing together regularly, and that helps.
Absolutely, that team bond we had, and I mean, obviously helped me in terms of international games because it got me into the national squad, and I played my caps during that period. So there was a good consistency of appearances and doing well defensively, because we weren't losing goals with a good record, and so it was good times, and that was probably the peak of your career.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that was your best football then? You were
probably,
playing your best football?
Probably, I think it's reflected in as I say, the international caps you picked up. Ended up with 9, so that's, I think, I got 7 or 8 of them during that period. I got 1 in 1990. But a lot of it was down to the fact that it was Aberdeen connections. I think when you went, not just because you knew your pal was playing in the team, but just when you went and got that you knew what each other were doing. So that was a really big important thing in international football. But that was definitely the best spell of my football career, and I think it's reflected in the Scotland appearances.
On to another infamous season, Willie's last. A lot of people, I know you say as a fan you don't speculate, but a lot of people say that season too many experienced players went out and not enough came in. So Mixu left, Lee Richardson, Theo Tenkat, Bobby Connor, and Alec McLeish all left in the summer, and so Billy Dodds came in, big money from St Johnstone. He also went in and scored a lot of goals. Colin Woodthorpe, and then John Ingalls was brought in, I suppose, to replace McLeish. But Ingalls even was, I think, memory serves, was a few 100,000 from St Johnstone as well. So he wasn't just out of nowhere. So what was that the big change in that season, or was there are other things that just...
You see, on one hand there, you're speaking about Bobby Connor, Alec McLeish, Stuart McKimmie as well. Oh, yeah. Players who were internationals were let go. Now, these players who came in were 400,000 or whatever, not just free transfers. No, there was good players, but there weren't at this stage international players. So that was a kind of loss of quality that we just couldn't replace because we couldn't get internationals in place. And Billy Dodds went on to become an international, for example. But that made it was a difficult season because obviously we struggled and lost a lot of the games. Found ourselves in the relegation situation, which actually turned into a winning season because we survived the relegation, and it was almost like winning something, even though you didn't get a trophy for staying up. But for me, if we'd been relegated, that would have been bad for Aberdeen.
Did you feel a bit more pressure then? So with a lot more of the experienced players going and having played so much the previous seasons, that you were pushed into this more senior role to lead?
Well, yes, definitely, because I wasn't getting a game as well, which made it frustrating, as if your hands were tied, because John Ingalls was playing instead, because Wally and Roy, who took over after Roy Aitken, were still going with John. And so I wasn't getting a chance to play. So when I got the chance to come in, that was my thing, was just to make sure I could do everything I could. And the first game back was against Celtic at Pittodrie, when I scored with a free kick from Joe Miller, and had a shot from the edge of the box and somehow
Great
ended
goal.
up.
I watched the highlights of that the other day. The first touch, where did that first touch come from?
Yeah, that must have just been everything coming out, and just that this is the thing, the start of this, try to get the results. And we got the result, and we got on a good run and ended up getting the playoff position. So we survived relegation, but had to get through the playoff to complete the escape. But yeah, that was like a victory, I think, even though we didn't win anything, just surviving relegation that year turned out to be a success, I think, for Aberdeen.
So you missed the start of the following season with your illness, but then you come back after 4 months, and obviously the team's doing a bit better, picked up the League Cup in November of that year. So was there a bit of a change under Aitken? How did Aitken differ from Willie as a manager?
No, I think they were both similar. I think the one thing I would say with Roy is he'd more of a kind of, I don't mean Willie wasn't enthusiastic. In his own way, Willie was enthusiastic in terms of motivation, but Roy was definitely a motivational type of guy. They were both very good in the tactical side in terms of the organisational. So no difference there. It was just, I think Roy had that wee bit more of a kind of enthusiasm about him. And initially, obviously with Roy, it did really work well because we survived the relegation year, won the League Cup the following season. But then, I can't again answer this, but how did it all go wrong with Roy? Because for me personally, he decided to let me go. He decided to let Stuart McKimmie go. This is when all the international players started to get let go. So I don't think he handled that side of it well, because he kind of let us all go at the same time and he kind of, there was a wee bit of bad feeling started to generate amongst the players, just because of decisions that had been made by Roy and his assistant Tommy Craig. And I don't know if that's why that happened, but it happened. And when I get let go in '97 with my testimonial year, I thought that was bad timing, because I was an Aberdeen player and I wanted to play for Aberdeen with all my heart, and to be let go was like, that was the lowest point in my football career, to let go by Aberdeen. And I wanted to show that he was wrong and let me go. So when Dundee wanted to sign me, they got all my energy in terms of saying, I'm sure that me personally, Roy was wrong to let me go, and so helped Dundee win the league championship in the first division, or what it's called championship now. It was called the first division then. When we came into the Premier the next year, we actually finished above Aberdeen and Dundee United and finished fifth in the Premier League. So that for me was showing that I could have played another 2 years easily with Aberdeen.
Do you remember much about your testimonial? You played Wimbledon.
The committee had to decide. I don't think Wimbledon was they had a good season that year, right enough, and had finished second in what would now be the Premier League, and finished semi-final of the League Cup and the FA Cup in England. So they were quite a high-profile team at the time, but it wasn't the biggest name. But to get a big name like Liverpool, you'd have had to get another 10. I remember somebody in the committee saying you'd had to get another 10,000 fans to cover the cost of what Liverpool would be to come up to play the game. So that didn't seem. So it seemed to make sense, because Wimbledon came up just to cover their expenses. So, I think it was if I had come out and only one person was there, I'd have been delighted that somebody had recognised me in my testimonial. And I thought when I came out the tunnel that one person was there, because it was the away end that the Wimbledon fans were in. When you come out the tunnel, all you see is the away end, and there was one man sitting in the Wimbledon end. So maybe at that point, for that split second, I thought there was only one person at the ground. But thankfully, there was I think it was 8,000 or 9,000 turned up. And there had been 3 testimonials in 2 years, so people were maybe getting fed up with testimonials at the time. So I was just delighted, though, that everybody who came out to support me, my testimonial, did so. And that was my payday at Aberdeen. That was my reward for all the loyalty and time that I'd spent at Aberdeen. I was then given the disappointment of getting released at the end of that season by Roy. And that's what made it even more disappointing, that, I'd been let go in my testimonial season by Aberdeen. And I think I had, as I said there, I proved that I could have still played on for a couple of years at least at the top before I'd moved on eventually to Ross County, where I finished my career. But, I thought I had at least a couple of years, and I think time has shown that I had a couple of years with getting those 2 good seasons with Dundee after I left Aberdeen. Not through my choice, but through Roy letting me go.
So looking back, what are your abiding memories? What's the memories that make you smile?
Cup final sits on its own, doesn't it? And that's kind of unique and special. But the relegation year, for me, that showed the spirit that I have. But I think the spirit that the City that year got, everybody was in it together. And a bit like the nightmare of this year for the coronavirus has just put everybody in the back foot. But treating people in a different way now, we've got to just try and, especially in the early days when everybody was looking out for each other and we didn't know what was happening. That spirit was the case in Aberdeen at the time of the relegation, and the whole club, the supporters and the players realised that it's not about blaming people, it's not about being critical, it's about just being with each other, and we get out of that situation. At the end of the day, we didn't win anything like the Scottish Cup, but we actually survived, and that was, for me, the most important thing, that Aberdeen didn't get relegated that year. Along the way, lots of memories and people, whether it be Alec Ferguson, whether it be the tea lady or whatever, some great people. And as I said that at the outset, if I'd known what the 30 years ago when I was standing at Pittodrie, what was lying ahead of me, it would have made me excited, because I didn't know. I was just thinking, am I going to last a week? Am I going to last a day before I get found out and have to go back to Airdrie and just carry on at Falkirk, whatever. 30 years experience of meeting people in football that I just have enhanced my life, and hopefully I've tried to share what I can about Aberdeen, how special it is, and I hope I've helped people feel good about themselves and feel good about supporting Aberdeen when I was playing for Aberdeen, and even now when I'm no longer a player, I do a wee bit of ambassador work, which I enjoy at Aberdeen. But if you can just get to make people feel good about themselves, about their connection with Aberdeen, because that's how I feel about Aberdeen. I've got a great feeling about it. It means so much to me, the club, and the club has done so much for myself as well over the years.
Perfect. I mean, given my age, when I first started going to football, you were the centre half. So to sit here and spend an hour with you chatting football, chatting the Dons, has been an absolute pleasure. So I appreciate your time so much, Brian. Really, really do.